finally, a source of raw, real, and honest information on healthcare issues that matter most. Welcome to BS Free MD. From the latest medical information to how to stay sane as a doctor or a patient, no subject is taboo, and no BS is allowed. Now, let's welcome your hosts, Doctors May and Tim Hindmarsh.
All right, welcome back to the BS Free MD podcast. And I just have to say, happy October. And I'm making an announcement that Tim's doing Sober October.
Well, you're supposed to be doing it too. So are you planning on quitting?
It's my birthday month.
What? So that's like, so your birthday is an excuse to get show-wasted?
I'm there for you, Tim. I'll support you. Anyway, we'll give you more updates as the month goes along. But for now, here's our intro. Here's our interview this week with our guest, Martha Tettenborn, a registered dietitian, and all about hacking chemo. All right, everybody, welcome back to our second video recording. This is really exciting. And if you're listening to the audio, welcome back to the show this week. We have an amazing guest here today. I'm super excited for you to hear this episode. Our guest is Martha Tettenborn. She's a registered dietitian, a fellow Canadian, and a certified primal health coach with over 30 years of experience working in various areas of nutrition. What makes her story unique is that she is a recent cancer survivor, as well as a longtime low-carb advocate. And if you're into the dietetic world, you'll know why pretty soon. And if you don't, you will know soon too. She also is the author of the book, Hacking Chemo, using the ketogenic diet, therapeutic fasting, and a kick-ass attitude to power through cancer. That was released in November of 2020. She has a blog, a website, and I'm super excited for her to share. She really likes to get the message out to more people, basically that you can have an effective food-based strategy that will impact your cancer treatment experience, potentiate the effectiveness of those treatments, and make cancer growth and spread more difficult. So without any further ado, let's get into the interview. Welcome, Martha, thanks for being here on the show. So happy to have you.
Oh, thank you so much. It's wonderful to talk to you.
So first off, why don't you just share with everybody a little bit just about your background in dietetics, how long you've been doing that, and
a long time.
Yeah,
you can tell by the gray hair.
a little longer than us, than we've been doing medicine, right?
Maybe.
So you are trained in Canada, I'm assuming, correct?
Yes.
And so for our listeners, just talk a little bit about what you, I don't know, how do we put it? The thinking in dietetics as far as diet. I know that there's not a lot of focus on low carb. I guess that's where I'm going. And
no, there certainly isn't.
What was your sort of viewpoint on dietetics, low carb, high carb diets, fads, things prior to 2018, 2020?
Well, I trained in the early 80s at the University of Guelph in Ontario. And the low carb guidelines that had come out of the United States from the McGovern Commission and stuff was brand new, cutting edge science at that time. So we learned the heart health, low fat, cholesterol is bad sort of hypothesis, and it was considered to be the latest, greatest science. And I personally, and most of my profession has, practiced that for many, many years. Not terribly successfully, I will say. But teaching people to eat low fat was the way everything was done. And it was probably, I worked in hospital for 6 years. Then I got into a bit of private practice, and I did some home care. I've done a bit of everything. I've done a bit of teaching at the local college, usually nursing students and things like that. And then I got into long-term care. and that's where I've been ever since. I really enjoy working in long-term care. So I'm a self-employed dietitian consulting to nursing homes at this point. But in about, I don't know, 2007 or so, I kind of got exposed to the concept of low carb, and that maybe fat wasn't the devil after all, and started doing some reading outside of the box and learning a few things. And one of the first sites I got really involved in was Mark's Daily Apple, which is Mark Sisson's website. He's had it running since, I think, 2006. And he was a very early low carb advocate in terms of getting out into the blogosphere. And that was what really opened my eyes to the fact that there was another way to do this. And that maybe what I had been taught wasn't science-based or wasn't effective, certainly wasn't effective. I personally struggled with the same 30 pounds of extra weight most of my adult life, and tried a million things to make it go away, sometimes more successful than others. And it was my own personal experimentation that really got me into the field of low carb in the first place. So I did eventually put my money where my mouth was, and I took the Primal Health Coach Institute training to expand on my RD license with more specific training in low carb. And so that's when I got the 2015 maybe got the Primal Health Coach certification as well.
Okay. So you've been doing the low carb at that point and having success with it, obviously yourself with patients. Did you get
Not
a lot
with
of
patients?
Oh, is that I was
Not
going to
much
just
with
say,
patients,
is that
no,
right?
just me being, not believing everything I read, I guess. It wasn't, I think about 2016, I started a private practice to see patients. I can't use it in long-term care. We have, provincial guidelines, and they have rules about the menu and stuff. And so I only can kind of very minimally impact people in long-term care. But I was trying to see private clients. Not much support in my little community. I must say the family doctors were like totally, it was just a big radio silence where they were concerned.
Wow, that's what I was just about to ask. What was, the acceptance or pushback from the medical
Zero.
support staff? Is that, yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, our docs, most of our family docs are in a family health team, and I had approached them about doing a lunch and learn or something like that. I was going to present the one thing I really was, after I'd done a bunch of introductory letters and stuff when I started my practice, and nobody was referring to me. They didn't know what insulin resistance was. They didn't know what a fasting insulin blood level was for. There was so much education to be done. But they also had their own dietitians as part of their clinic. And I thought I would get in and do a lunch and learn session. And I was going to present on the PURE study when McMaster University released the PURE study, which was this ginormous epidemiological study, like hundreds of thousands of people from every continent. And they had looked at a lot of different things. But it supports the idea of getting away from sugar and processed foods and into, real whole foods and lower carbohydrate, and that fat and cholesterol weren't associated with heart disease and stroke and so on. And so I was offering to do a bit of a presentation on that. And again, I got declined. So
Wow.
yeah.
It's
So
just like, because they must, I'm assuming
blinders.
yeah, exactly. There's no financial thing to shut you down. It's not like you're pushing a product or associated thing. It's just the whole thing of they're totally made up their mind and they don't want to hear it.
No, there's two things. There's definitely financial interest. There's just not direct financial interest of physicians, because when they started, at least in the United States, when they started clamping down on what drug reps could give you. And I think that actual kind of moratorium started in Canada before it started in the United States. Mm-hmm. Then they stopped detailing as dedicatedly to physicians, because most of us kicked them out. We just closed the doors and they wouldn't let them in. Well, where they went was to diabetic educators. They went to dietitians. And so you work at a hospital and the Lantus rep comes in and reps all, gives you a nice lunch and reps all this new insulin, Humira and Lantus and ultra short acting and ultra long acting and all of this. And so there was this massive financial interest to get as many people on insulin as possible, even though Canada correctly didn't push the ultra long, ultra short insulin because they showed that from an evidentiary perspective that using just 70-30 and old, pork and cow-based insulin was just as good as far as outcomes, which is interesting because as far as outcomes, staying morbidly obese on insulin is probably the worst thing that you could possibly do. So if you were going to go down that insulin path anyways, you weren't going to change outcomes at all.
Right.
Mhm.
But back
Which is the
back to
problem.
her point of this is private clinics, correct? That just said no, we don't want you to come in, or
No,
was this hospital?
no, this was all of our family docs are together in a family health team. So
Okay.
they have their own, central registration and stuff, but it's basically all the family docs in our city. And they have, there's a lab, there's physio, but there's also dietitians in the clinic. So I got no referrals locally. And of course, at that point, I was, before COVID and everything else. And I wasn't trying to do anything digitally. I was pretty old school. I wanted people in my office. And so, I kept it going for a few years, but it wasn't growing or anything. And then I got a cancer diagnosis. So it was the first thing I let go.
Yeah, well, so walk us through that for us and our audience to, I've read the excerpts from your book and kind of know what happened, but yeah, give us a brief summary, how you discovered,
Yeah.
what was going on and what led up to your diagnosis.
Sure. So, to jump to the punchline, I was diagnosed with stage 1 ovarian cancer. So, but to back that up, I discovered it. I discovered that I had a lump in my abdomen by laying down on the floor to do a plank. That exercise where you hold yourself up, right? It was a text message
Sadly,
from.
most people.
What's that?
Oh, I was just gonna say, sadly, many people don't know what that exercise is, and they should.
Well,
But
I
we
don't have a
do.
life where I ever lay on my belly. I just don't. It makes my neck hurt. And I don't have grandchildren. I don't have puppies, and I'm never on the floor. So I hadn't noticed until I got a text message from one of my best friends who I've been friends with since grade 7. And she said, "So what are you up to on your plank?" Because she knew I was thinking about it. She was going for a 2-minute plank. She was actively training for something. And I thought, ooh, haven't done that in a little while. So I just got off the couch and I laid on the living room floor. And the moment I laid down, there was something in my pelvic, like in my lower abdomen. It felt like I was laying on an egg. Like it was just weird. And immediately I knew there was something. And so I just sat up and grabbed my phone and called my doctor and said, "I need to come and see you. There's something in my abdomen." And so I was in and then my husband came in from outside and I sort of said, "This is, there's something. I don't know what it is." So about 5 days later, I saw my doctor. And of course, in the meantime, I had been on Dr. Google and was busy trying to diagnose myself as usual. And I had thought I had maybe a fibroid on my uterus. I still had all my parts, even though I was well past menopause. And I went in to see my doc and she poked around and, with her more experienced hands and made a lot of, kind of not good noises like hums and haws and oh dears. And then sent me off for an ultrasound. And it was another couple of days before I got the ultrasound. And she called in the afternoon that day and said, "You have a huge," that was her word, "huge ovarian cyst." Just a big fluid-filled cyst. But it was 16 centimeters across, which is about 6 inches by the time they had located it. Sort of explained why I was finding all my summer pants to be tighter than usual. But anyways, so she said, "We need to send you to a gynecologist and they will probably want us to do this blood test for ovarian cancer." So I did the blood test. It came back just a touch above the reference range, like just above normal. And the doc said to me, this is not a great test. It often has other factors that are affecting it. So don't worry about it. It's not cancer. And the gynecologist that I eventually saw said the same thing. It's like, if I thought this was cancer, I would be sending you to our regional cancer center. And so we arranged to have a laparoscopic removal, which meant that they went in with the little, 2 or 3 little rods in small incisions, and they ruptured it inside my abdomen and then sucked out the fluid and then removed the deflated balloon. But that took almost 2 months. I mean, it was summer, right? So it was middle of summer when I found this, and it took till the end of September before I actually got into surgery. But nobody really thought there was a problem with that, except that the cyst was still growing. Like during that 2 months, it was actively growing. Like by the time I had it removed, it was above the level of my navel. So it was like being about 5 months pregnant. I'd have to sit down in a chair and pull my pants up over my belly button to get over the hump, sort of thing. So,
Wow.
so anyways, they did the laparoscopic surgery here at my local hospital, and I came home and was, recovering, and everything was fine. And 6 days later, they called me and said, this is the surgeon's office calling. The doctor wants to see you. Come tomorrow morning, bring your husband or bring another set of ears. And I just kind of went, oh, geez, I know what that means. You work in healthcare, you get these things, right?
Mhm.
And my husband came in from outside, and I told him what was going on, that I'd had this phone call, and we just kind of looked at each other like a couple of deer in the headlights. But we went in the next morning, and they said that it was what they had removed turned out to be high-grade serous. Well, no, actually, they told me the wrong diagnosis the first time. It was a little complicated, but in the end, it was high-grade serous carcinoma stage 1. But it had been ruptured inside my abdomen because it was too big to encapsulate in anything. And so I was highly recommended to follow the path of best treatment for ovarian cancer, which meant chemotherapy.
Okay, so if
Um,
that wouldn't have been ruptured and they were able to just take the ovary in totality, then that potentially would have been a surgical cure, I would assume, correct?
Probably. Yep. Yep.
Because
But it
because if
would
that's
have
the
meant
case,
like a full abdominal incision. And I mean, I'm an absolute surgery virgin, you know, and
right?
I wasn't going to say yes to that for any. I mean, if I'd known it was cancer, yes, of course.
Well, for
But
sure.
this was the
Yeah.
best option. And the local cancer center, like the regional cancer center, is 3-hour drive away. So, having this done at my local hospital 15 minutes away made a lot of sense. And I
Sure.
worked
Yeah.
at the hospital years ago, so for me, it's a familiar turf,
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's interesting though, like for our non-medical listeners, ovarian cancer, especially in its later stages, is so unbelievably um how do I say this, virulent that
Deadly.
even just touching the tumor when you're doing surgery can spread it to other areas. So this whole idea of, well, this looks benign, we'll rupture the cyst, which makes sense because then they can do it through a laparoscopic procedure, which, is you had a
Mhm.
90+% chance it wasn't going to be anything serious. Um, that's the part where it kind of changed what you had to do because now you're getting into the chemo world, correct?
Yes. So I went off to London, Ontario, which is our local regional big cancer center, and met with an oncologist. And how he explained it, it was really interesting the way he explained it. Ovarian cancer is called the cancer that whispers because the symptoms are nondescript, like bloating and maybe mild abdominal pain or constipation or things like that. Um, that women just like pass off on them. They don't take themselves seriously enough, right? And so the doctor explained to me that the tumor was gone before I even knew I had a tumor, right? And So we were chasing individual cancer cells, but what the cancer cells can do is they can seed these little tumors all over the inside of your pelvic cavity, your abdominal cavity, the walls of your organs, the walls of your, the cavity itself, the omentum, all that fatty tissue that's in the middle, and can seed tumors all over the place. So he described it like dropping a bag of flour in the middle of your kitchen. And the bag goes, the flour goes, right? And everything's covered in dust. And he said, that's what it could be like. We don't know, but he said, you'll never know if they're there. You'll never know if the chemo killed them because you can't tell that they're there. You have to kind of do it on faith. And he was really, he was a man who practiced the art of medicine, as well as the science of medicine. He explained it so well that even for a terrified skeptic like me, he explained why chemo was a right choice. And then he totally left me to make the decision. Well, my husband.
That's inspiring, actually, because we hear a lot of the opposite of that. And so it's really great when you hear somebody that is just, he's being a doctor, because so much of it is not studies. It's not, it's how you communicate. It's how you, it's like they say, it's not just what you say, it's how you say it. It's massive. So, so you've already been on this low carb journey. It's been working for you as far as changing your overall health. And now we kind of get this marriage of, now I have a cancer diagnosis. I'm going to obviously take chemo. And these two things kind of meet. How did that meeting happen between this, change of heart diet wise and how you, quote, hacked cancer?
Oh, I think the toughest thing was that this rocked my sense of identity, right? Like, I was healthy. I was smug about being healthy. I was 58 years old. I was riding my bike 50 kilometers. I was at a, decent weight. I was at a healthy BMI. I took 0 medications, nothing hurt anywhere. I was like, I had lots of energy to do the things I wanted to do in my life. And I wore a whole lot of different hats, and different activities and volunteering and stuff. And suddenly this cancer diagnosis sort of drops into the middle of my world. And it's like, I'm not so healthy, and I'm going to have to be sick, and I'm going to have to take this medication that's going to make me even sicker. And it was really, really hard for me to accept that, I couldn't play that role of being the super duper health expert that can help everybody age awesomely and all that stuff that I wanted to do in my private practice. Right. So yeah, I really struggled with that. And I really struggled with agreeing to further surgery, for one thing. Once I did decide I was doing chemo, I basically said, okay, I only plan to do this once. So hit me with your best shot, because hopefully we'll get everything right off the bat. And one of those decisions was that I could do intraperitoneal chemotherapy. So the type of cancer that I had is, the doctor described it as a sticky cancer. It doesn't tend to escape into your lymph nodes and go elsewhere in your body. It likes to stay in your abdominal cavity and seed tumors in there. That's the description of the serous carcinoma. So one of the options that he offered me was intraperitoneal chemo, where the chemo drug was actually basically poured right into my pelvis, into my interior pelvic cavity, so that it kind of sloshed around the outside of all those organs and would hopefully hit up any cancer cells that might be there. But to do that, I had to have a surgery to have a port placed so that I could have that one drug just, poured right, basically drained right into my abdomen. And that meant that, among other things, not only did I have to have the surgery, but I had to have all my chemotherapy treatments down in London, as opposed to having them at the satellite office, which was in my own hometown, because they didn't do that kind of chemo up here. So it was a big decision because it was winter. Like chemo was going to happen over the winter in Ontario, in the lee of Lake Huron. Like it's very snowy here. And so every 3 weeks we would have to drive the 3 hours down to London and spend an entire day in London and then drive 3 hours back.
Wow. So when you're on that, while you're on that journey, and how long did that last that you did the chemo?
The chemo itself was 5 months. So from the time I found the cyst to having surgery, to having it removed, to finding out it's cancer, to going to London, to having the second surgery, and then starting chemo, and then ending chemo was about 11 months, I think, all told.
So how are you as far as nausea, vomiting, just how you're feeling functionally? Were you having really low periods? Were you able to stick to your regular, I wouldn't say diet, but the way you like to eat normally? Did that kind of fall apart, or were you spurred on to sort of research more about how diet would affect your treatment?
Oh yeah, no, I wasn't going to accept the status quo. I was down the rabbit hole as soon as this whole thing started. And from my perspective, which is low carb, whole foods, animal based, not necessarily keto. I had experimented with keto, but most of my life I lived at sort of a moderate low carb, whole foods sort of process, with the occasional foray into potato chips or a drink
Of
or
course.
something. Yeah, real life happens, right?
Right.
But I started looking into what I could do for myself, and I discovered that there is an entire field of knowledge that I didn't even know about, that you would call cancer metabolism. That there's people doing research on how cancer cells use fuel, and that it's different than how healthy cells use fuel. And I mean, once you're talking fuel, you're talking food, and it's like, that's my shtick, right? I can, like, holy cow. And I got into the research of Dr. Thomas Seyfried at Boston College and Dr. Walter Longo in California, and read books by Miriam Kalamian and Nasha Winter, and like a whole lot of different people who were working already in the field of cancer metabolism, but it was very, very limited at that point. Just the amount of information that's happened even in the last 4 years since I've been learning about it is pretty stunning. In fact, I consider myself extremely fortunate that it happened all at the time that I was going through the process, right? So I discovered that, like, you could impact on cancer's ability to grow and to fuel itself by how you put food in, and which foods you chose, and what hormonal effects those foods had in your body. And really the most effective thing was a ketogenic diet and fasting and getting your body to use ketones, because cancer cells basically can't use ketones. And once I got down that path, it was like amazing. I was just, my mind was just blown, and it's like, I need to be able to use this. So Dr. Walter Longo had done a lot of work on fasting for chemotherapy. He had proven that it does not negatively impact on the effectiveness of chemotherapy, and if anything, it potentiates it. And that people who fast during chemotherapy tend to have fewer side effects. So I fasted for all of my chemotherapy treatments, and I had very few side effects.
Wow.
Compared to what was expected for the drugs that I was being given, I had very few. I never once threw up. I had minimal nausea. In fact, I hardly had to take any of the nausea medications or any of that kind of stuff. I was never horizontal. Like, I was never in bed. I never missed a meal unless I was fasting. In fact, I never missed making a meal. I'm the cook. Sometimes it was just bacon and eggs or something, but I never missed making a meal. And then I would, climb back into my armchair, and Mike would, my husband would clean up. But no, I would have maybe 4 days of low energy. I called it low energy. And then I could feel my energy starting to come back up. And then I'd have about 2.5 weeks of pretty well normal. I know I was
So,
running marathons, but
so what kind of fasting technique did you use? Was it something very specific? Was it just like not eating right for so many hours before the chemo and after? Because there's a lot of
yeah,
different fasting regimens out there, that we've
there
been
are.
researching. So
Yeah.
what did you do?
Well, the first thing I did is I went into a strictly ketogenic diet for the entire period I was in chemotherapy. So for that 6 months or 5 or 6 months, I was, there was no cheating, there was no nothing. And I had a meter, and I was making sure that I was at least moderately into ketosis the entire time. But then before chemotherapy, and again, based on the work of Dr. Longo, I chose to fast for 36 hours prior to chemo and 24 hours after the chemo. And I would use, it was a supported fast. It wasn't a water only fast. I used bone broth and coffee and tea, herbal tea, bubbly water, so nothing with any sort of sweetener in it, but just, it was winter. I need hot drinks, I'm a hot drink granny, and I couldn't imagine life without my coffee in the morning. And so that I kept that up through the whole thing. But basically the point of fasting was to get myself deeply into ketosis. And also, I didn't realize it at the time, but what I was doing was the ketosis was actually supporting and protecting my healthy cells from the chemotherapy, and the fasting was protecting my healthy cells. It's not even as much, I thought it was more about what I was doing to the cancer cells, but it was actually protecting my healthy cells. Because when you fast, your body just goes into a maintenance mode, where it just slows down unnecessary growth and energy production sort of processes, and it does some autophagy and cleaning things up, and it waits for the fuel to come back. So it waits for the signal that the fuel's coming back. And we've been able to do that since we were like primates on the savannah, right? Because we couldn't eat all the time. So we have this wonderful ability to produce ketones, which supply your body's need for a water-soluble fuel that can get to the brain and, fuels the muscles and all that stuff. And the muscles and most of those things can also burn fatty acids. And the liver can produce what little bit of glucose it needs, and everything's fine. So I call it stealth mode. The healthy cells go into stealth mode. They quiet down. And what that does when you're in the middle of chemotherapy is the chemo is like well, they're poisons, but I mean, they are drugs that are chemically targeted at the signals of fast metabolism, because cancer can't turn its metabolism off. That's one of the hallmarks of cancer. It has no down regulation, no stealth mode, no off switch. It's hungry to grow all the time. So that's why it's hungry for fuel, and it burns sugar. It prefers sugar over anything else. It can also burn glutamine, which is an amino acid, but it really prefers sugar, and it burns it in a different way than healthy cells. Very rapid burning, but not very efficient. So these cancer cells have got these big red flashing lights on them, and the healthy cells have all gone quiet. And so the chemotherapy just like flies right over them, misses them, heads straight for the cancer cells. And so your healthy cells don't get hit with the same chemo effects. And basically that's what side effects are, right? Side effects are your healthy cells getting hit with chemo effects. In a normal adult body, we don't have a lot of areas that are growing rapidly all the time. We have things like our hair follicles that are always growing. Our bone marrow is always producing new blood components, hemoglobin and white blood cells and platelets and all that stuff. And the lining of our GI tract is turning over all the time. And that's why those are the areas that get hit with side effects more than anything else. you go bald, you lose your hair, all your blood values start to drop, and sometimes they drop so much that people need extra, things to support that. I never did. Not once did I need a Neupogen or anything like that to help me through. And I never had mouth sores, and I had, like I say, almost no nausea. I had the only problem I got into was some really serious constipation, and that's just because I wasn't taking it seriously enough. I kind of went, oh yeah, I'll be fine. Oh yeah, I'll be fine. Yeah, after about 4 days, I wasn't fine. But I only did that once, the first go around, and then I kind of said, okay, I can deal with this. And I created a keto bread recipe that was basically almost all fiber. And I used that every day that I wasn't fasting, and that kept everything moving very regularly for me. So I call it my magic keto flax bread.
So when you talked about cancer metabolism, I find this super fascinating because, and you've done an outstanding job describing this. I love the whole idea of cancer attacks rapidly metabolizing cells. That all makes sense. Ergo, you lose your hair. And so you're slowing down the metabolism of healthy cells, so they're not getting hit as hard. And the cancer is now angry because it can't, consume the ketones. And so, it's sucking up this chemo and dying, hopefully. What about insulin? How do cancer cells respond to insulin compared to normal cells?
Well, the research says that cancer cells usually have more insulin receptors on their surface than regular cells because they need more sugar. And so they love it when people eat high carbohydrate diets that push up their blood sugar level. Therefore, the insulin level goes up in their blood and they can get more sugar. So by keeping the insulin level super low, like by keeping the carbohydrate intake super low, your body doesn't need to shoot out a bunch of insulin. And so that stays really low as well. So again, that's another growth factor that isn't there for the cancer to use. Dr. Seyfried describes what he calls the press pulse theory, where you apply a pressure, which is the low carbohydrate diet or the ketogenic diet, and the low insulin levels and everything. So you apply that to the cells so they're not getting what they need, so they're stressed, and then you hit them with something. So that's the pulse. And it could be chemotherapy, it could be radiation, it could be a variety of alternative treatments. But that idea of hitting them when they're down or when they're stressed to make the treatments more effective is how he describes it.
So you listed here about this chemo fasting protocol. Is it something you came up with, or is this something that's new in the literature? We've been out of primary care for the last 13 years. We've been doing urgent care, so we're not quite in the know on some of this stuff. I don't remember ever hearing
the first
a lot of this when our patients it's just all about the chemo or the radiation, no big push on the diet.
Yeah, I heard of this in the last couple of years from an acquaintance and who had a very serious diagnosis of cancer and started doing exactly this. And when I first heard it, I'm like, aren't you going to lose a bunch of weight and feel terrible on the chemo anyways? Why are you fasting? And so, and it has appeared to be quite effective, but it's interesting to hear the description of why this intuitively makes sense. What the actual metabolic factors are, and it makes sense, right?
Yeah, I mean, it just sounds so simple that it just sounds like, why haven't we figured it out sooner?
Yeah,
which you know what though, somebody figured it out back in the 1920s.
Yes,
that's the worst part of this, is that it all got lost, right? I mean, the guy who won the Nobel Prize in 1931 won it for describing the metabolism of cancer, like the disordered metabolism. We still call it the Warburg effect because it was named after him. But he was a German guy practicing in Germany under the kind of auspices of Adolf Hitler, despite the fact he was Jewish and gay, right? But Oh,
Wow.
Yeah, those are boy. If he would, and he was probably a communist, so he was absolutely 3 of the things that Hitler hated the most.
Oh, and his ego was about this big, apparently, which is kind of why he survived, despite the fact that Gestapo kept showing up at his doorstep. There's an amazing book about this, the whole story of Otto Warburg. It's called Ravenous by Sam Apple, and it's just come out in the last maybe year and a half or so. But it's the story of Otto Warburg discovering cancer and how he sort of made it through the whole Nazi, the development of the party. And Adolf Hitler was terrified of cancer. His mother had cancer, and that's part of the reason that he made it as far as he did. But I mean, this was a man who, Einstein used to come to his house for dinner because he was a friend of his parents. Like he was a brilliant man. But the thing is that after the war, anything that was published in German, like I don't think anybody really took it seriously, because nothing about Germans was considered worthwhile at the time, even though their science was so far advanced. And then Watson and Crick discovered the double helix. And once we could see the double helix of DNA and see that it's damaged in cancer, the entire cancer industry, the whole, thought everything went genetics. And that's where it's been stuck until just recently, when some people started looking at this whole metabolism thing again and realizing that, both things have a role to play in cancer treatment. So now, there is starting to be more information just recently.
Well, yeah, but that's been one of my themes through all of COVID, and it's actually become a theme almost of the podcast, which is 2 things can be true at the same time.
Yeah.
And also how a lot of good research squashed because of politics.
Well, and it's not just politics though, but it's money. It's money.
And politics.
Totally money.
And yes.
You don't get rich. You don't get rich off.
Follow the money trail.
You don't have a 20. I mean, like, look at these advertisements on TV for these cancer therapeutics. Okay. Like you take, for instance, Optivo, and I don't care. I'll name them, whatever.
Well, we're in the US, so we have, 70% of, what is it? 70% of commercials now?
Yeah. At least on football games, 70% are
No, I heard
Oh my God, really?
I heard altogether commercials.
So if you look, like I have the insanely stupid habit of actually freezing the television and reading the small print when they start doing the advertisement.
When they talk like 10,000 miles an hour about all the side effects.
May cause position, may cause demon possession, but whatever. So if you look at Optivo, right, and actually these are interesting drugs, and they may end up being just amazing chemotherapeutics. But when they advertise them now, they show people, hugging, and wouldn't you want more of this? And, wouldn't you want to live longer? Right. Well, of course you would. But then if you actually read the small print, it says people on this drug live an average of 90 days longer than people
how much money?
on $18,000 a month. Okay. Because I looked it up and you can't find it. I actually had to go to a pharmacy manager friend of mine for her to dig it up, in essentially hospital system records to find out, because you can't Google it. It doesn't exist. But that's what it costs here, $18,000 a month. But interestingly, it's for end-stage lung cancer, amongst other things. So if you increase somebody's lifespan by 90 days with an end-stage anything diagnosis, are you really making them live longer, or are you making them just have cancer longer? I mean, that to me is sort of a teleological question, but that's what it is. But it's $18,000 a month, and that's just one drug. Okay, Provenge, which is used in castrate-insensitive metastatic prostate cancer, has been shown, again, same thing, maybe 6 months more with terminal cancer, and it's $90,000.
Yeah.
So
it's crazy.
So fasting isn't going to be popular, because fasting is actually cheaper than eating.
It is. It's free.
It's the cheapest thing you could do.
Who's gonna get behind that?
Right?
That's what Jason Funk says all the time. It's like, this is available to anybody. It's free.
Yeah.
Yes.
Not sponsored by Coca-Cola or Frito-Lay or Old Dutch up in Canada, right?
Nope.
No.
Right. Wow. Yeah.
So, tell everyone, because I'm excited for them to learn. So while you're going through this, you journaled and kind of kept track of what you were going through on your cancer journey. And when did the idea for the book and thoughts on that sort of start to come into play?
Well, I started blogging pretty early because I was gobsmacked that nobody knew this stuff. And mad that nobody knew this stuff. And so I decided to start a blog. I don't remember whether it was somewhere probably in the first part of chemo that I decided to start the blog. And like the very first post I ever put up was the chemo fasting protocol. This is what I'm doing. And so it's there for, for anybody who wants to look at it. So I got a website and set up a blog, and it wasn't too long before, some people were going, well, you write really well. You should think about writing a book. And I was like, well, okay. I got a fair bit of free time these days because, I had given away a whole lot of my roles and my jobs and stuff. I was still working at one nursing home 2 days a week. And they were being very flexible, working around my treatments and stuff. So that was great. But all of my other responsibilities I'd given away. So I really had a lot of free time. And I thought, this kind of makes sense. So I put together an outline, like just a chapter by chapter sort of, my story, the science, and then some of the stuff about the kick-ass attitude part. I really wanted to get in there as well, that spiritually and psychologically, how you go through cancer makes a big difference as well. And then an implementation section, like how to do it, recipes, the actual fasting protocol, how to do a keto diet. So, and make it really user friendly, because really I wanted people to know that this is out there, that there is something besides the genetics of cancer and you can actually impact it.
Right.
So
And did
what?
you ever, I'm sorry, I was going to say, did you ever meet through the, I don't know, online chat sites, any patients there, anybody else that was using this method at all for like a support?
Not while I was using it myself. No. I mean, I was reading the literature that was available at the time. I had read Miriam Kalamian's book, Keto for Cancer. She's a woman out of the US who used a ketogenic diet to keep her son with an end-stage brain tumor. He was a 4-year-old with an end-stage glioblastoma. And I know, I see your face. And she was desperate to help him. And she found the work of Thomas Seyfried, contacted him directly, got him on a keto diet, and that little boy lasted another 7 years.
Oh my
Wow.
good!
Good quality
you
life.
kidding me?
That's crazy.
No, go read it.
Wow.
Look
Okay,
her up
so what
on-
is?
Look her up on TED Talks.
Okay, well,
Miriam
yeah,
Kalamian.
That's
like
amazing.
I'm getting goose flesh
You
here.
are.
Um,
Oh my gosh, you.
I'm getting
He is.
goosies, as they say. I don't say that because that sounds silly. But anyways, so what has the response been now? Like, has the, do you get contacted by patients a lot? Like, has the blog really blown up? I'm just like, this just seems like such a no-brainer that it should be
Yeah, so
implemented.
I've
everywhere.
I do work with people. I'm limited by, you would get this as medical doctors, I'm limited by my license. I cannot practice as a dietitian outside the province of Ontario. So I do education and health coaching type stuff on lifestyle. I try, I'm not prescriptive. But I coach people through, because there's a lot of mental, psychological stuff that goes with this as well when you're going through cancer treatment, and I help people to feel empowered through what they do, and to help with just how to implement it. Like where do you find a bread substitute? What do you do when you're getting constipated, that kind of stuff. So I have my own private practice. It's called the Cancer Doula. And I love that, because a doula is a person who helps someone going through a medical or a life process. Birth doula is the one most people know about. So the birth doula doesn't birth the baby. They're not the doctor. They're not the midwife. They're there for the mother. They help the mother through the process. And that's how I look at what I do. I'm I'm not prescribing, I'm not treating, I am the doula, I'm the person that helps that person going through the cancer process. So that's my own private practice. I also, in the last few months, have started working with Miriam, who's one of my heroes, as a keto coach to help out with some of her people as well. So
That's awesome.
So
yeah.
have any oncology systems or doctors or like implemented this into their practices? Like, do you know? I mean, I would think that this is, I mean, I'm a water skier. It's a small community. Like, you tend to know everybody. When I was skydiving a lot, you know everybody in the world that's really good because there's like 100 people kind of thing. And
Yeah.
so I would think that this would be a smaller community because it seems more, you know, counter narrative, shall we say? So
It
are
is still, yeah, definitely counter narrative. So there are
are
a few
there?
there are a few integrative oncologists around who use, a variety of different treatments, both the allopathic stuff that we're familiar with, the radiation chemotherapy sort of stuff, and then alternative treatments, supplementation, and most of them are also recommending at least a sugar-free diet, if not a ketogenic diet, and some use of fasting. So there's a few centers around North America that I know of, and a few individual doctors that. But I'm like I say, I'm fairly new in the actual keto for cancer out there space, and so I'm sure there's more that I'll learn about as time goes on.
Yeah,
But they are out there.
there's another point here I think that's really, really important, which is, you mentioned, the other aspects, the kick-ass attitude. And I think the important, this whole, fasting is not easy. It's not particularly difficult, but it is a learned thing. Like, you have to learn how to do it. May and I changed how much protein we eat. We changed how we worked out. Your body has to switch over to processing,
Mhm.
160 grams of protein a day. It's a different
Or
world.
160 grams of fat a day.
Yeah, exactly. Well,
Oh
yeah,
no,
which is
I have
probably,
no problem doing
yeah,
that.
I don't know that
I
you
think I'm an
say that.
Eskimo, honestly.
Yeah, the whale blubber and stink flipper, right? So,
Yeah.
but anyways, the thing that's really interesting is is it's giving the patient something to do that actually has
Exactly.
a positive effect on their health. So what
You
it
are
does,
empowered. Yes.
that's exactly
Yes.
right. And empowerment, I can't stress enough to people how big of a deal that is. Okay, so
It's
people come.
huge. It's a monster. So what I looked at is, okay, so you look at cancer as, oh, you're a victim of cancer. Well, no, I refuse to be a victim. Thank you very much. A victim is someone who sort of says, oh, poor me. All right, tell me what to do. And I don't have a role to play in this other than to lay back and let you cut me open or burn me or poison me or whatever, right? Like, and I'm the victim. Or you're a warrior, and you are fighting the cancer. And you have to be like battle ready and all geared up, and that's full of like stress hormones and anger images, and it's like, I don't want that either.
No.
So I one of the biggest things for me was to come to the realization that cancer is not a foreign invader. It's me, it's my own cells. They're misguided, they're doing the wrong thing, but they're me, right? They didn't come in from the outside. And so I approached the whole process from a position of love and self love and valuing myself and loving my body despite the fact that it had generated this cancer. And again, the cancer was just misguided me. So I look at it like the Marie Kondo, that cleanup guru, the decluttering
Yes.
guru, right? She says, oh, look. She says, if something in your life doesn't spark joy, thank it for its role in your life and let it go. And it's like, cancer gave me what I'm doing with you. It made me a published author. It revitalized my entire career and sent me off in a whole new direction that I'm so excited about. but I don't need it in my life anymore. Thank you. You can go now. But I did it from a position of love. And that empowered me then to value everything that I can do for myself, because I'm a powerful member of this team. I am not the victim, and I am not in a war position. And that's why when I was trying to find the title for my book, I had to find a way to say that without being a victim, without being a warrior. And that's where the kick-ass attitude part came in, because it's
I
about being empowered.
I love it. I love the balance of that, because you're right. Everything you said about, if it's not the victim attitude, it's people go full bore warrior, and I'm like, well, that can't be healthy either for all the
Exactly.
emotional, spiritual, as well as metabolic reasons.
Yeah,
So
but it's
I love
interesting
it.
because the medical industrial complex, which I've been bitching my brains out about for probably my entire career, so almost 30 years, wants you to be a victim. I mean, the
Mhm.
gold standard is not to produce a new antibiotic that people take for 10 days. The gold standard of drug development is to take a pill that you never stop.
Yeah.
So it's wildly in the
Oh, of
advantage.
course.
It's way better business practice to be on Paxil or Prozac for the rest of your life, or to be on cholesterol pills or blood pressure
Yeah.
pills,
Statins. Yeah.
or all of the above. And it's the one thing I always hated about psychiatry, at least modern, you know, drug-based psychiatry, which is you're broken and we'll fix you. Well, maybe you're misguided. I mean, there's people with really severe mental illness, and I'm not making light of that. And I think that, yes, there's medications that help those people at least get some modicum of life back.
It's a
Mhm.
tool in the toolkit, but
But
it's yeah,
it's become the only tool in the toolkit in so much of medicine. It's like,
Yeah.
it's like an app on your phone. There's an app for finding tickets to the next football game. There's, you go to the doctor, there's a pill for that. Well,
right.
is that
Yeah.
really the best solution? I mean, sometimes.
No, but lifestyle takes work, and people don't even realize that it's an option,
Right.
because
So
nobody's offering them that option. Pills are easy.
I have a whole bunch of questions, sort of where you're at now. And I kind of want to ask some sort of nitty gritty numbers things, because, we've been throwing around the term keto. Um, I know keto is really popular. I don't know how long, people should be on that. I've also been doing a lot of research on women compared to men doing fasting and keto,
Mhm.
especially the fasting, and in different age groups. And there's not a lot of, we kind of argue about it. And I've been looking at, there's not a lot of data on women. Now, this is not during cancer treatment. This is totally different, but doing fasting at the perimenopause and postmenopausal years. In fact, I think it might actually be more harmful to the hormonal levels, and that women don't do autophagy the same as men, and it increases insulin resistance, etc. So I'm so fascinated with all of these things in optimal health going forward. So tell us now, like, first off, the with eating keto, um, are you doing it now still post coming through
No.
cancer? Okay, so it was a tool that you used, mostly the fasting as well as the keto diet during your cancer therapy.
So it's solid beer and pizza now, I would assume, right? I mean, I hacked chemo.
And
Let's get it on.
I was gonna say, yay, good for you, because from the reading and research I've been doing, for women postmenopausal, keto is probably not a good option for hormone balance, depending. But and I don't know that it's good for anyone long term for various reasons on the days I'd
I
looked.
think I'm just going to
But
chime in. If you're going to open that can, I think that for people with metabolic syndrome, in other words, type 2
I think very
diabetics,
specific,
I think keto
very
is
specific.
almost magic.
I
Is
think
it magic for everybody?
no, yeah.
No. No.
So
And it's a hard place to live on an
Oh my
ongoing basis. And
gosh.
I don't think it needs to be. You don't need to be there on an ongoing basis. Keto is a powerful tool for specific things, but a modestly low carbohydrate, healthy fats, whole foods based diet that includes lots of good quality animal products, lots of fresh fruits and vegetables, um, and then that's at least 80% of your intake. and good fats. That's another big thing, is getting the industrial seed oils out of your diet, getting the sugar out of your diet.
Our friends in
Um,
Saskatchewan are going to freak out because they make a lot of money off of canola.
they make,
Boo.
and pea protein.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Big deal. It's a big deal in the prairies, I know. But you know, those are highly processed foods, right?
Right.
So I choose not to eat them most of the time. When I do have anything that is grain based in the house, I try and make sure that it's organic, so that we're avoiding the excessive glyphosates and things. So my husband still eats bowl of breakfast cereal every night for his evening snack, and it's an organic breakfast cereal that I always have in the house for him. We have regular bread and keto bread in the house, and the regular bread is organic, and that's what I make him a grilled cheese sandwich, and I'll make myself one on a keto bread. So, you know, 80% of the time you're doing that. Well, probably in my case, closer to 90%. But, you know, then I say, if I went to someone else's house and they served me a dessert, I would eat it probably, you know, if it's something I like.
So on the keto, did you measure specific amounts of protein, fat, and carbs? Did you ever use sort of a macro ratio that you could
I
throw
didn't,
out
but
there or not?
I have a really good sense of where nutrients are in food, a lot more than the average Joe.
Right.
So I didn't make a point of worrying about following macros. I watched my blood sugar and my ketones a couple of times most days. That was before the days when I got a Keto Mojo, and you know, strips were a reasonable price, but the ketone strips in Canada are just a stupid expensive price. So I didn't use as many of them as I might have otherwise. And I watched my weight, and I knew I was in ketosis most of the time. But again, I come at it from a position of having a lot of kind of base knowledge, and that holds me in good stead. So I wasn't worried about tracking or watching macros or any of that kind of stuff. And it was kind of before I knew really a lot of. I mean, I knew it, but I didn't see the worth of it for myself.
Okay.
Teach other people to use chronometer or some sort of tracking thing,
Right.
because they don't get where the fats and carbs are in food, but I kind of knew that already. So
So can we talk a little bit about the keto foods that are out there? Because I have a little bit of a, personal thoughts on. I know people that do the keto diet, or they're gonna, go on this eating clean and do keto for a while and stock up on all these keto products from the store. We maybe talked about this a little bit, but what are your thoughts on, the keto breads or keto packaged goods?
So keto sweets, I can't really get behind.
Right.
I don't think we need to be using sweets on any kind of regular basis. So that's like the protein bars and the artificially sweetened cupcakes and all that. I just can't see a point to those. And they just displace real food, really. Like, they give you a lot of calories, and you can get fat on a keto diet if you eat a lot of that crap.
Right. And a lot of
But
I think the sugars that they put, the artificial sugars that they're using, the stevia, gosh, I think some of them are more hideous. The sucralose, Ace K are
yeah, well, there's a
probably
difference
more
between the
harmful.
ones that
Yeah,
are actually like extracted from a plant versus the ones that are created in a factory, right? So stevia
exactly.
is, I mean, you can buy a stevia herb. It looks like a little green oregano plant or something, and you eat a leaf and it's incredibly sweet. But stevia has an aftertaste. There's monk fruit, there's erythritol. Erythritol is made usually from like corn cobs or something. And it's a sugar alcohol, but it's the least offensive of the sugar alcohols. But it has a very cooling taste in your mouth. It tastes like menthol. And so there's lots of places where that's not so nice either, right? There's a new one called allulose that is what they call a rare sugar, and it's extracted, I think, from figs and a few other things. It's
Huh.
crazy, stupid, expensive, hard to find, but it's actually probably the best tasting of the bunch.
Interesting.
But
I'm a
I don't
purist.
have a sweet tooth, so I mean,
Yeah,
I'll get my occasional
I'm a
thing.
real purist, and Tim and I were doing, macro counting and playing with our macros with the trainer for months, and I ended up using, because of this high protein phase I was in, having to use powder just to get my whey powder to get my macros up. And long story short, I found out very quickly the artificial sweeteners in these powders to give them flavor, and I was having a lot of side effects and a lot of GI side effects, brain fog, like the flu, the whole bit from some of these, and quickly realized and did my research that I'm like, if I'm going to have anything, I like the monk fruit. I like the things that come from plants. Maple syrup and honey all the way. And that's about it.
And of course, they're not they're not going to
No, they're not.
help you get into ketosis, but they are natural.
No, exactly. So then I was like, all that artificial crap, forget it. But
yeah. But I think if you just have a sweet tooth, eat some, just figure it out. Figure it out in your macros, figure it out in your total calories that you need, and then just eat less.
Have it once in a while, right?
Yeah, once in a like one of the best pieces of advice I ever got. It was a gentleman I was friends with, and he had lost 220 pounds. And he said he never deprives himself of anything, because he realized once he got into deprivation mode, he would eat everything else that he would overeat everything else other than that thing. And then he would feel so guilty because he ate so much anyways, then he would just get that to the ice cream anyways. Yeah. So if he would have just had a little bit less, just a little bit of ice cream, he could have satiated that, and then he wouldn't have eaten anything else. He said he would eat the entire house and end up at the ice cream anyways. And I think a lot of people are like that.
Life is too short, right?
Yeah.
To mess,
you have to
budget yourself that way.
Right. You have to budget it.
Yeah. What I usually tell people is you make decisions about what goes in your mouth multiple times a day. So if you are presented with an opportunity for something that isn't in the plan, and I mean, when I was doing chemo, I was 100% on the plan. There was no cheating. I didn't matter if I went to someone else's house for dinner. I didn't have a drink. I didn't have anything sweet, but for real life, if you're going to have something, I always tell my clients, make sure that it's something that makes your heart sing. Like, don't just a donut on the on the table at work, blah, right? But have something that feeds your soul as well as your those calories, and make them worthwhile, right? So for me, I couldn't care about anything chocolate. I'm not a person that cares about chocolate. But a lemon bar, like one of those custardy lemon bars with the shortbread on the bottom, I used to, every time you go to a funeral or a church lunch, there's always someone who brought lemon bars, right? And I mean, I loved them. So I learned to make really good lemon bars. But I probably make them once every couple of years. But that's something that makes my heart sing. And if I ever get someone, I've never made them, if I ever get a chance to eat a date square, that takes me back to my mother. Right.
That's
my
funny.
mother made date squares in the 1960s. Like, that's my mom. So.
Guess who just bought dates today to make date squares tonight?
Did you really?
I really did. I'm not kidding. I love those things too. And we were just back up home in Canada a couple of weeks ago. And I had one, and my passion is butter tarts from Canada. I love those, but date squares as well. That's funny that you said that, because I have a craving.
I like Hawkins cheesies and gin, so I don't think there's any hope for me.
Corn, and more corn.
No, I've get done with corn.
It's all
corn
about how often,
No,
right?
cheesies are corn.
Yeah, no, that's right.
And
Corn.
gin,
or
no,
Melba toast.
yeah.
Melba toast.
There
You
you
can't.
go.
It's hard to find Melba toast.
I love.
Wow.
I grew up eating Melba toast. I love it too.
Yeah.
Crunchy. But I have found some low carb crackers that provide me with the crunch. And they're made from teff, which is an African grain, and they're just, it's a local Ontario product, and they're really lovely, and they meet my need for cheese and crackers or dippy things. And yeah, so I think back to the idea of like clean versus not clean. If breads and cracker substitutes that are made with things that don't contain a lot of carbohydrates and that are relatively good quality ingredients, if those things make keto or low carb easier for a person to live within, then I don't see why there's a problem, right? They shouldn't displace things like having a serving of a good quality meat or fish or chicken or something every day so that you're getting some high quality animal proteins. They shouldn't replace, vegetables. But, I probably have a keto loaf bread based meal at least twice a week. It might be a grilled cheese sandwich or something like that.
Are you still?
I think that's a very Canadian thing, grilled cheese sandwiches.
It
It's
is.
not really common.
Are you fasting still?
I intermittent fast most days, so I don't usually eat until late morning or lunchtime. I just have a coffee, and my coffee's black usually. So most days I'm eating in about a 6 to 8 hour window. Occasionally, my husband's hungry. We make it, eggs in the morning. But then if we do that, we don't tend to usually have lunch.
Yeah.
So, and maybe once or twice a year, I'll do. I won't do a 72-hour fast anymore. I find that it doesn't work that well for me. I did it during chemo. I did 36 hours before, plus the day of chemo, plus 24 hours after. And for me, that was 72 hours. But what I find works better for me now, if I want to fast, is I do 3 days of 23-hour fasting. So I'll fast for from supper one night all the way to supper the next night. And then I'll have a modest meal. And then I'll fast again for 24 hours till the next night. And what that does is it allows me to have a much better night's rest. Because when I'm fasting and I'm deep in ketosis, I don't sleep very well. And that's me. Right. So 3 times 24 actually works better for me than a 72-hour fast.
So we go,
Interesting.
let's do that. May we go 23 hours and then we go to the Golden Corral for an hour.
I can't get all the calories in I need in that window.
Oh, I know lots of people
gosh.
that's basically how they live,
can't
and they
do
can
it.
somehow cram 5,000 calories into 1 hour. And I'm like,
but of course, the point of fasting is that you don't get all the calories in. The point of fasting is to not, right?
No, but it's interesting because I'll see patients and they're struggling with their weight and they're very, very big. They're over 300 pounds and they're like, I only eat once a day. And I go, yeah, well, how's that working out for you? I think you're doing something else.
Yeah,
it's all about what you do in that 1 hour.
Right. Yeah, I'm trying to gain muscle phase. So for me, fasting's not in the cards right now. But
I like it because I have I'll go 16 hours often, at least 2 or 3 times a week. And then if I'm really hungry in the morning and I know I'm not going to be able to work out because I can't work out fasted because you get used to what your body's telling you, then I'll eat something and I just won't worry about it that day. Because you're obviously in deficit.
You make those choices day to day. It's about the paradigm that your brain and your perspective is in. And so you can make those choices day to day based on you are standing at this particular place, and that's where your mindset is and your belief system and everything else, and you make choices from that place. And like I say, if my husband at 9:30 in the morning says I'm hungry, you want some breakfast, and it's like, yeah, okay, so we'd make some eggs or something. And the next day, neither of us care. And, so nobody eats until like 1 in the afternoon. And it doesn't matter. I'd rather make a meal and sit down and have a meal with my partner than, be all high and mighty and say, no, I can't eat until whenever. And if the occasional time happens that I am active, like purposely fasting, like when I do my 24s or something, I will still take my cup of coffee or my cup of tea or whatever, and I'll sit at the table with him while he eats, because for us, that's important, right?
Do you stare at him like our former yellow lab when we're eating steak?
No. In fact, I said something to some people on a Zoom call that I was with, and I said, yeah, I'm fasting. That was when I was doing the 24-hour fast. And I said, yeah, I'm fasting right now. And I said something about having, made lunch for my husband. And they're like, you made lunch? Oh my God, you're a strong woman.
Right.
But it didn't include lemon bars, so you could do it.
Yeah. Like, just not to get too bunny trailed, and we're pretty close to the end here. This has just been absolutely wonderful and very captivating. But one of the things I always come back to, and you alluded to this a little bit as far as the Nobel Prize in 1931, and how this was not secret. I mean, this was out in the open. This was well-established data for, 82, 83, almost 85 years, which is ancient wisdom is ancient wisdom because it's wisdom. Because if it was ancient bullshit, it wouldn't exist anymore. And
Yeah, very true.
every single ancient wisdom culture, whether it's Christianity, Judaism, Islam, even Native American beliefs, all incorporate fasting.
Yes.
It's fascinating to me.
Mhm.
I mean, and there was periods of feasting, but there was periods of fasting. And it's like, in modern Christendom, it's like we gave it away. Like it's like you want to raise money for your church, you have a banquet. And I'm like, well, maybe
Yeah.
we should have been
Or a
doing
everybody does a potluck lunch, right?
right.
Right.
It's just like, well, maybe we should be doing it the other way. And I just find that it's this enduring thing that until recently has been largely forgotten in Western society, but it's been an integral part of the biggest traditions in the entire world.
Right.
Well, I mean, when you look at the rest of nature, they don't eat 5 times a day. Like, okay, other than herbivores who like graze constantly.
Right.
Or
But I mean,
hummingbirds.
yes. Very true. We have those in our backyard. They're back and forth to that sugar feeder all the time. um, but yeah, like we're built to be intermittent eaters. We have all of the hardware on board and all of the blueprints are on board, but we've given that all away by eating carbohydrates 6 times a day.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that is a perfect way to put a bow on this. That's exactly right. We are predators, whether you like it or not. We have eyes on the front of our head. And predators eat intermittently.
Vertical chewing.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
You eat, and like look at big cats. They go on a hunt, they eat, they sleep for however long, they don't eat again for another 3 or 4 days. And
Yep.
we're somewhere in the middle there between that and cows.
So I want you to if you would love to share your posts. I know you're on Facebook, where people can find your book and any other social media that you're on, so that I know, because people are going to be wanting to get their hands on this information. Where are you at?
Sure. Sure. So my website is the blog and a work with me page if anyone's interested. And that is simply my name, marthatettenborn.com. So yeah, the latest blog is always what shows up. But like I say, things like the fasting protocol are just there. And actually, if you put in your email address, you get a download of the 1-page fasting protocol that I used. There's links to the book there as well, but the book's on Amazon and all the international platforms, plus, Barnes and Noble and Chapters and Apple Books and all that kind of stuff. So it's available as an ebook and a paperback. And I have a Facebook page also called Hacking Chemo, where people can follow me. I post on there more regularly than I do on the blog. So I don't do any of the other social media. I don't do Twitter or Instagram or any of that stuff. I'm old school and one is enough.
Yeah, exactly. I'm with you.
Yeah.
We're all over the place, and I'm like, we can't keep up. All right. And I will definitely put links to all of that in our show notes and on our social channels, so that people can find you as well when the show comes out. And thank you so much for just being here, sharing your journey and all that information. I mean, it's amazing, because I never honestly didn't even really know about the fasting through chemo as a technique, and it's amazing. So
I want to get the word out. So I really appreciate you guys letting me talk to your guests, and you guys have been great hosts.
thanks so much. Well, thanks again for your time, and it was just a pleasure getting to know you.
Thank you. Have a great evening.
All right, that was really fascinating to hear how Martha used her diet and keto to really make a massive difference, especially in how she felt during her chemotherapy, and really how it possibly impacts the treatment of chemo. So for the people in the back requesting the SparkNote version of that, cancer seems to feed off of sugar and carbohydrate. And by reducing that in your diet and following a ketogenic diet where you're almost carb free, it really seems to make a difference in slowing the growth of those cancer cells, but also really makes a difference in your chemotherapy outcomes as well, with minimizing side effects from the toxins of the drugs, with less nausea, etc. So that seemed to be another win for her for sure. Of note is that she is still not on a keto diet anymore. So it had a limited purpose. And now she's back to eating mostly, it sounds like, a paleo-based type of diet.
Well, she's low carb.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing about low carb, and we'll do an episode at some point on sort of what we've, we've interviewed the vegetarian. We're going to interview a carnivore. We've had like everything all over the map. People very successful with intermittent fasting. That was, who was that? Daniel Reyes.
Oh,
Reyes.
yeah. Daniel Reyes.
Reyes.
Yes. With the intermittent fasting.
Amazing. But, what have I always said? The diet that works is the diet that works. But I think the diet that works the best is low carb. And I think there's a whole bunch of ways to get to low carb.
Right. This was really specific, though. This is
right
targeted for, cancer therapy, maybe treating cancer. But lots of people successful on a keto diet for weight loss and changing their health. That's for sure. So fits right in with the Sober October month. No alcohol, no carbs.
Well, I don't think it's quite that simple.
No toxins.
Well, there's less toxins, that's for sure. I mean, it is poison. It's delicious poison, but it is poison.
Delicious. If you're listening to the podcast, remember you can watch the video interview now. We're streaming it on Rumble. So check us out on Rumble. Just look up BS Free MD. Otherwise, find us on all your favorite podcast platforms, and we'll see you next week. It's no secret that medicine is a bit uptight. That's why Tim and I created BS Free MD, to mix things up a little and have fun in the process. Besides, we are having these exact same discussions all the time, so we thought we might as well invite everyone to the party. If you really like us, you can get plenty more and maybe see one of Tim's cool tattoos on our Instagram or Facebook pages at BS Free MD. See you next time.
While we try to keep BS Free MD as raw and real as possible, we can't be held responsible for any medical decisions or discussions had as a result of what you've heard on the show. We know, bummer. But the truth is, we really do care about your questions. So feel free to reach out to us by email at doc@bsfreemd.com.